All right. Continuing a little bit from last time we were taping, if not a lot. When I was mentioning the destruction of one's own myth by way of it being personalized. Now back to a couple of tapings ago when I said that my myth, had I told you my new creation myth, its beginning, which every story has to have a beginning, would have been, I suggested, along such lines as, and I gave you two choices at that time, that my new creation myth might have begun with saying, in the beginning there was no beginning, you recall. And I even gave you an alternative. But I also point out that all other myths, to point out the obvious, always begin with, in the beginning something came from either nothing, as one of their versions, or something emanated, something grew and progressed out of something else. Now if, and for you people on tape, I hate to say it, but this is a, since we're in the middle of the summer and it's high noon, this may be along some lines that resemble metaphors and paradigms and tropics, etc. That everyone has their own creation myth, although of course you may not have put it that way, that you feel is the origins of you, not just genetically, not just physically, but you have a nonverbal continuing, and you can verbalize it if asked by a psychiatrist, by yourself, by another person at the bar. You can come up with an instant creation myth, thusly, or to witly, how you came to be what you are. And it would be, without you having any particular knowledge of it, it would be either that you came from nothing, like, well, that's the kind of guy I am, and I'll be damned if I know why I'm that way. Bring us another round. Or it would be, well, all right, I'm this kind of guy. Or now that you mentioned something about so-and-so, I guess I am sort of that way. I never really thought about it so much, but all right, I can tell you why I'm that way. So there are the two basic, ordinary creation myths, that something came from nothing, or that something grew out, emanated, evolved, was produced by something else. But in attempting to do such as this, if you fall into, if you let your own sense of what you are fall into one of those creation myths, here's what has happened, as happens with everybody, but you will be continually stuck with it, with the story, is that your intellect has then established a duality from which you will never free yourself. You can look at it as the beginning, as you're supposed to for all ordinary events, but you can look at it as the beginning of that kind of dichotomous entrapment, that from the very word go, as long as you take one of the two possible stories of creation, your own, that I came from nothing, not physically, I came from nothing personally, or what I am personally came from something, from some other environs, from some other influences, from the actions of other people. If you take either one, and it does not matter which one, as long as you continue to live with that, what has happened, as I pointed out, happens to everybody. You can't escape it beforehand. But you have gone ahead and now aligned yourself forever with that initial establishment by the intellect of this duality, of dual kingdoms, and under all ordinary conditions, there henceforth is no way out. People can argue philosophy, they can talk about the limitations of words and etc. forever. But if that person who's doing the attack, philosophically and theoretically, on the limitations of believing in opposites, etc., as long as they are still operating on the basis of this original establishment of their own intellect of a, from a choice of two, creation story for themselves, they have let their intelligence establish an original dual kingdom, a dual stewardship to their own nervous system, from which it cannot escape. Do you understand? It's like your own intellect. Let's say a man's intellect could pick out what color it wanted to think in. And you can have your choice of green or purple. And you picked out green. No, you picked out purple. No, you picked out green. You see what I mean? No? All right. Back to the main track. Let's say you picked out green. That was the first thing, as soon as you were created, the first thing that creation wanted to know, assuming you came from something. And if you came from nothing. So, either way, But if you came from something, the first thing it says after you're created is, all right, you want to think green or purple? And you go, green. Do you understand? If that's the basis, that in other words, your language from then on will be the green language. You will think with green electrical and chemical processes. Do you understand simply? Now this is a simple metaphor. You will think green the rest of your life. Everything you think, everything you imagine, everything you try to do will be in some way greenish. I'll admit it's not a perfect parallel. But if you start out, as everyone does, and continue with what intelligence has established on the basis of a duality, you cannot escape from it. You can argue. Somewhere later in life you can say, well, I don't believe that as much as I used to in the very clear-cut distinction, so black and white between good and evil and right and wrong. I'm too sophisticated. I smell a rat. And I smell that there's something else. You can say that, but it won't change anything. Because the initial establishment of the way in which you think was based on a duality. There is a slight variation in that. If you took my second, if you recall, not the ordinary myth, but I said if I was going to offer a beginning, my variation was, in the beginning, remember the first one, in the beginning there was no beginning. And my second variation was that I suggested that possibly my creation myth, had I told it, would have said, in the beginning there was two beginnings. The real beginning and the talking beginning. The myth beginning. But the talk beginning is differentiated from the real one. Now even if you apparently got over that far laterally, if not vertically, out of the ordinary realm, if you tried to take one of those, you are still left with your own nervous system, your own voices that is, continuing to tell you what your creation was, and you are continuing to be stuck with personalized information, a personalized myth, because then you are still in the position of this reaffirming your own local intelligence, and it puts what you seem to know, the creation of your myth, the creation of your intelligence, at the center of everything, which makes it personalized. And if that's it, then what you know is of no consequence. Not to do this, whatever this is, but you can't think anything new. You can't do anything additional with your own brain. You cannot think in any way outside the ordinary limits wherein you are the center. Not a matter of ego. It's not psychological. It's a matter of energy. It's a matter of the way energy moves. It's a matter of conservation. It's a matter of the way energy flows. And if you have personalized, if you took everything you know as being in some way tied to you, and no way you can do that, the way everyone does it automatically is that you are still at the state of original intelligence. You're still thinking at the old site. And it's like a great magnet. Instead of an antenna being as they are in ordinary life that they broadcast, this kind of antenna, which is another way of saying the lens, the kind of antenna that is human intelligence at the old site, can not only broadcast, it can receive. And it can do both simultaneously, and it can do both and it can do it in another way that we're not even going into. But it can do it both ways. But as long as you're thinking at the old site, then everything you know, and you don't have to say it, you can deny it and it won't help. That everything you know is tied to the personalization of your own myth. Real simple then. I'd like to hear it. Okay. Give me a break. All right. Let me try to make it simple. See, this is not an attack for you people on tape making this new. This is not an attack. Nothing is wrong with life. Nothing's wrong with ordinary people. Nothing's wrong with the way you think now, if you're happy with the way you think now. But at that level, this personalization of information is everything that old intelligence knows is inseparable from old intelligence. Now, isn't that plain enough? That's just obvious. I, in some way, should probably, in the ordinary world, win a supremely dumb, stupid, and slow award because I've stated something so obvious that I guess if throughout history, all right, for another, I'd guess, at least 4,300 to 5,000 years, if you had every monkey and every human on this planet locked in a room with a typewriter, and they all were typing out sentences accidentally. I'll admit, I'll agree that maybe they would write the collected works of Balzac and Dickens and God knows who else, but I bet they would never, even accidentally, type out that sentence that, well, under ordinary conditions, everything people know is inseparably connected to the organ, to the function that knows it. I mean, it's so obvious. It is so dumb that nobody would even accidentally, I don't think that fate, serendipity, would have these monkeys, much less professional writers and ordinary people, accidentally type that sentence out. But part of the trickery, as always, is ordinary intelligence can say, well, that's so obvious it's dumb. And ordinary intelligence got no idea what I'm talking about. As witnessed by its own comment that, well, that's stupid. If you're at the center of what you know, then everything you know is personalized, or else you don't even know it. It's of no consequence. That is not revolutionary information. That is not new intelligence. That is not thinking more than you have to. That's thinking just as much as you have to. Now, just as much as you have to is running at maximum speed. It's a magnum serving. It's not a split. It's not a small little chintzy grocery store bottle of champagne. This is the full version, but it's still all you've got to think is what ordinary people do. And what people ordinarily think is with them at the center. What do you know that's of no consequence to you? I'll answer for you since we're in a hurry. Nothing. Oh, yeah, I've heard stuff before that was no consequence. Well, how do you know it was no consequence? Well, it just wasn't. But see, if you could hear that, you go, well, because it was no consequence to me. Well, don't you hear that? Yeah, but you're pushing it too far because that doesn't mean it's of no consequence to anyone. Back to what I said, though. Are you still listening? All right. All you know is tied inseparably to the thing that knows it, your own intelligence. You are at the center of it. Now, I can't agree with that. Well, you just did. No. Well, you said that there's things to be known that are no consequence to you. Yeah, I said that. But you then went ahead and admitted that, well, I guess they exist. Yeah, I heard you say that. So that belies what I said, right? Right. What is the fun of whatever this is when it seems to strike you? What is the fun? I don't normally try to describe anything, but I could say that one possible explanation in the future would be that you suddenly learned something that was of no significance to you. Now, of course, don't go telling anybody that or they'll be trying to come after me. That's one good thing about being this far away from the initial intellectual side. I started to make a joke and said they'll be coming after me with a white coat, but they won't, because once you go far enough, it's so far removed from it being of any significance to anybody that it's not even of any significance in the ordinary world to psychiatrists, or if there is a psychiatric version of attorneys, of an ambulance chaser. They wouldn't. It's not people wandering around thinking, well, we got to make a living. We got to find some more crackpots to take in. If you get too far away, you're not even a crackpot. See, to be a crackpot, you're of some significance to people in the crackpot profession, psychiatrists, etc. But if it's out far enough, I'm not making jokes. Anybody's still following this. I'm still talking about exactly what I was talking about. If it gets far enough away, see, it's of no significance whatsoever. It's new intelligence. That's why this doesn't even threaten. If you take it far enough, it doesn't threaten people when they hear it, because they don't hear it. I mean, they don't hear it and say, well, wait a minute. This is grossly untrue and it's dangerous so much. And, oh, of course, it's wrong, but it is so dangerous we should do something. We should have the man shot or arrested. We should prohibit this kind of talk. But see, then it's of some significance to whoever's saying that. Even though they may be railing against it, denouncing it, it's of some significance. But if you get far enough, see, you're kind of safe. That no ordinary person finds this to be of any possible significance. So therefore, now back to me talking to you. As an ordinary, talking to your ordinary brainstem at the old building site. It is at the center It has personalized all information. It is the personalization of your own myth of being alive. You can't help it. There's nothing to go back and undo. But everything you know is you are the star in the center of your solar system. And it's not egoism. Although notice that that's been denounced for years and years and years and years. It's a crude reflection of something else, of saying a man should be humble and etc. It's very crude. It's almost a brittle ritualization of the myth itself, the original one. That is the original information. That you cannot have new data, there cannot be new intelligence on your part if you are still at the center of what you know. If it's like my old brain, my old me, my old personality, my old building site, that is where I get everything. That's where you got to bring all deliveries in, all new information comes here because by God, I've got an IQ of 160. I've got 2 or 3 PhDs. I am not a dummy. All right? So information comes in, I get it. I sort through it. I pick out what's good, take out what's useful. All of that keeps you at the center of what you know so that everything you know is only self-serving. Even if you hate it, even if you denounce it. It has all been personalized and it all revolves around you. One more time I repeat, this has nothing to do with being an egomaniac or even a partial egomaniac. All it's got to do with is being human and getting the chemical and electrical necessities up here so that you think. But at the ordinary level, you have personalized all the information. Everybody has. And so, therefore, everything you know, which could be in the realm of paucity, all the way to the other extreme of copious. You can know a little, you can know a lot. And it doesn't matter. Whatever it is you know, wherever the amount is, you, that is the old building site, the old personalization, is right at the center of it. That is not what this is about, in case anybody cares. And of course, if I had to excuse myself, then I could say, that's why sometimes you people look at me so blank like, well, boy, sometimes you don't make any sense. There it is. Or sometimes I see the look like, well, this almost, I can sort of theoretically follow some of it, but I can't see the significance of it. That's it. I mean, if you're still coming here to find something that's of personal significance to you, well, you've been coming here all this time in a very, as we say in the Alabama psychiatric trade, you've been attending here in a very addled condition. I mean, you just haven't noticed. I mean, if you've been coming listening at a personal level, you haven't noticed that I never say anything that's of any personal significance. Of course, unless I'm feeling bad or addled myself and didn't know what I was saying. This is a spot for a grand example. Don't anyone, especially on tape, people just fairly new to being exposed to this, do not take, I'm fixing to use the word myth or maybe drag in gods, per se, myth or gods, even my use of the term for this example, is not of the consequence. But here is a place for a grand example. Is that clear enough? It's clear enough for an ordinary preface. Now I asked if it was clear. Okay. Of course, if it's going to be clear, why would you even need a preface, right? That's even true back in the ordinary world. A grand example, I suggest to you. I have never used, up until the last just few tapings, I have never used the word myth until I suddenly started using it. Never used it. And tried not to use, except in very strange conditions, even the word gods with a little g. But I had not used the word myth up until now, and I will tell you why. I'll remind you one more time, the word myth is not the point. I could pick out another example. You follow? I could say that in our talks up here while taping, I have never used the word transaxle. Of course, I know that you don't think that was going to fit, but just remember that. Just remember what I said as you find yourself about to be sucked into thinking that there is something important inherently in the word myth. You following all this? What a preface. So, I have not said before, I have not used the term myth or transaxle until now, but for a very specific reason. Sort of been saving it, but that's not even the point. But I have, not just myth, don't think, I've been saving it. Remember, I hadn't said transaxle either. I have not used the word myth up until now for a very good reason. And yes, I will tell you what it is. It is that I did not want to have to define it. Now, even as I continue for a while, and have been for the last few tapings, to use the word myth, and I've been using the word also tied to it, gods, I do not mean what the dictionary says the word means. I do not oppose that definition, and I am not simply redefining it. The reason I have not used the word myth is I didn't want to have to define it. I didn't want to have to oppose the definition of it. I didn't want to have to redefine it. Put on your bulletproof headband. Try it this way. The reason I have not used the word myth before now is I didn't want to have to say the word. That's taking it down to the subfloor level. That's a little below, a little behind, a little beyond me saying that I did not want to have to define it. The reason I hadn't used it is I didn't want to say it. Not just myth, don't get carried away. Also transaxle, remember. Can any of you, in any non-personal way, begin to grasp the significance of words or looking at words as being energy symbols, but to look at the significance of words undefined? Not the significance of words, not the lack of significance of words, not any sort of verbal support and praise of words, not any sort of attack on words, but the significance of words undefined. Well, pressing right along, I'll have to ask this. Could any of you even get a glimpse of the fact that the only significance in the symbols that are energy transfers, known as words, that the only significance is when they're undefined? From a more complex, if not unusual, view. All right, let's try it this way. I would put this to you, that a good myth, which has got to be put in words for all ordinary presentations, a good myth simply presents itself to good and proper ears. A myth only begins to attempt to prove itself, which they all do, but it only begins to attempt to prove itself when its power begins to wane. That is when it begins to be ritualized. That's when it begins that people begin to take the myth literally. Now, I can very quickly draw out should be the obvious examples of religion, and that the myths of all religions are no longer undefined, not even anywhere close, because as soon as they were spoken, they became at least partially defined. They became minimally defined. But they no longer have any flexibility. It's why they're religion. They are now ritualized. They are now taken literally. Other than that obvious example, dear audience, think about, in a quite personal and private way, that you are now ritualized. All right, kids, you can take a kid to the temple and he can cause a ruckus. He can run around, he can stick his tongue out at a priest, he can drop his pants, he can moon the choir. But when he gets older, when he reaches the age of responsibility and he comes back to the holy place, he then takes it seriously. A kid can laugh at himself. Now, I know that many adults can make a joke about themselves. This whole thing, people can laugh at themselves through jokes. But it's only children that can actually laugh at themselves, in case you've never noticed. They have a good heartache, because especially before they can talk much at all, they can really have a good laugh at themselves. And other things, but it's undefined. They can't even talk about it, and it's non-hostile. They can just have a good old, heartfelt, jolly laugh at themselves. But by the time you begin to talk enough to amount to anything, you begin to personalize the myth of what you are. Instead of it being now a creation myth, it has now become a religion. And you cannot moon the priest. You can't run around while the rabbi is talking and make rude noises and throw a ball against the wall. Nobody has to tell you. You just know you can't do it, because now you got to take it seriously. Now forget all that. Now inside, you no longer can laugh at yourself like a non-verbal kid. You can make jokes about yourself, but you can't laugh at yourself anymore. You are now brittle. You now take the myth literally. An ordinary person can now, once they're grown, once they reach the age of 12 or less, some age, once they reach that age, they can no longer laugh at themselves. They can make a joke at themselves, but they cannot laugh at themselves, because it is now serious business. They have now personalized the myth. They have now taken the myth literally. A good myth simply presents itself. In the beginning, and there's no way to verbally deal with this. It's like me trying to either juggle or throw you a hot piece of coal and tell you not to let your hands get warm at all and to catch it. It's impossible. There is a limit to words turning on themselves, the same way as that kind of, to say the least, delicate surgery of any system attempting to study itself and describe itself. It can make the attempt, but then who's going to analyze it? Who is there outside the system investigating itself to then interpret the data? So, keep that in mind. Okay. A myth just presents itself. A person simply finds themselves alive at whatever age you can remember. Mostly, I suggest, I'm not going to argue with any of your recollections, but what I'm pointing out is mostly at the age to where you begin to rely on thinking, and then, of course, talking, as a large part of your orientation when you were a kid. That was your beginning, in the sense I'm talking about. That was the beginning of your creation myth, taking in the old possibilities, that you came from either nothing or you came from something. But there you are. A myth simply presents itself. As long as it's still in the mythical, flexible, living stage, a myth just presents itself. Now, to jump back from this internally to the more obvious external to some of you, any of the old stories, from any religion, any mythology, but let's take religions as being the artifacts left of myths. Take the opening lines of any religious book. Take the Quran, and just start reading the Old Testament. Now the words, me describing it, is already ruining the example. But in the beginning, the creation of their creation myth, the first time it was told, not the retelling, but the first time it was told, and assuming it could have been told in a way that was not even absolutely dependent upon words, you figure that out, it was then a myth. It just presented itself to good and proper ears, which will take up for some of the warning I had to give of the delicacy of words, and part of the impotency of words examining themselves is only people with good and proper ears can even hear the myth originally as just a myth that's simply presented. It's not presented, comma, because. It's not presented followed by a proof or argument. A good myth just simply is. It just presents itself. If it lives beyond that initial stage, beyond a few seconds, it will eventually begin to have to attempt to prove itself. And it does that only when the initial power of it, and there's no way to look at this real quick, that is, the people who had good and proper ears and the need to hear the myth to begin with, they've died out, they've gone on, times have changed, The myth no longer needs to exist in that kind of pristine, non-defined state. And it's then that the myth begins to become ritualized. The myth begins to have to defend its own existence and to prove itself, to prove its worth. Now, internally, how about my old description that I use at least once a month of the most favored form of human conversation back in the city, back at the ordinary level, and that is people telling what kind of guy they are. People telling what kind of guy they are is them beginning to personalize their myth. And it is also this: it is a sure sign that their own potency is waning. Anybody that's telling you what kind of guy they are, either across the board or in some specific area, if you want to look at it that way. But when that becomes a large part of your life, just consider in general your potency of all forms, not just sexual, but your potency, your powers here are waning. And that's why you begin to tell, hey, I'll tell you the kind of guy I am. I'll tell you what I blah, 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 what I do, what I used to think, what I did. That's what it's a sign of. You are now becoming ritualistic. You're becoming brittle. Your power is waning. That's why myths began to try and prove themselves, whether it seems to be, and heretofore it's been almost exclusively in the world of religion. They attempt to prove themselves. Notice there is no religion that simply presents itself. Nobody'd fool with it. I don't have time or the interest to go much further. You ought to be able to do that kind of thing by yourself. Now, if there was a religion that just presented itself, that just had some idea, whatever it was, that God is a transaxle, or God is love, whatever you like. God is a shoe in the road. But it just says this, and you might go, wait a minute, that could have some significance. Tell me more. That signifies there is no more. Well, wait a minute. I can see some, well, perhaps allegorical validity or some promise to the idea that God is a transaxle. But then, look at it another way, you're going to have to tell me more. In other words, what they're saying is you're going to have to prove the validity of this, to prove this in some way worthy of my consideration. A good myth just presents itself to a few or to some good and proper ears. It just presents itself, and a few people hear it if the time and place is right. Other people do not hear it. If they do hear it, they say, wait a minute, prove it. And that might only take a few seconds. In other words, the myth, I'm playing with time, but if you're trying to follow some of this so that you don't think that even verbally I'm not keeping track of what I'm saying, but some of you should be able to shoot out by yourself. That's why I keep trying to talk faster and faster and faster so that I can cover a whole bunch of possibilities, and you go, oh, and somebody else goes, oh, and then I can press on. Like the myth presents itself if we're using ordinary three-dimension time. It presents itself, and the myth goes, blah, 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 blah. And a few good and proper and needy ears here and there go, what does that take? 5 seconds. Another 5 seconds. Let's say that X number of people heard, literally, the myth as it presented itself, but they did not have good, proper, and needy ears, and so another 5 seconds goes by. Or let's say 10, that they're real reflective. Another 10 seconds, and they say, tell me more. And the myth says, okay. All right, God is like a shoe in the road because, have you ever, and it starts. Let's say it took 20 seconds from the original myth presenting itself to it beginning to attempt to prove itself. It took 20 seconds then for the myth's power to begin to wane. That is the only reason, now don't worry just about myths, humans, institutions, all activities, they only attempt to prove themselves when their power begins to wane. Because some of you might get real quick and think, well, hell, everything that happens on this planet almost attempts to prove itself immediately. It may not have to do it verbally at the time or overtly, but tacitly. If it were not true, also consider this. No one speaking to anyone else would support what they say in any way with any sort of passion. As soon as you say, no, I'm not that kind of person. No, I wouldn't care for a drink. Wait a minute, you can't talk like that in front of me and my wife. What you're saying is, let me tell you the kind of guy I am, by what I just said. And what you're also saying is any power that I might have over this is already gone before I can talk about it. Or else you would have no passion about it. Of course, some of you might consider the alternative. the conversation still went on of a planet full of whatever it is, 60 billion people all talking in a dull monotone. Because I guess we could assume then that firing line has been brought back and is going to be shown forever to all of us. All myths, whatever I mean by that. And I remind you, I do not mean what the dictionary means. But whatever the dictionary says, I don't oppose that. And I'm not giving you a redefinition of it. I'm just not telling you what I mean. But I don't mean that. Just remember that. And I don't mean its opposite. All myths only begin to attempt to prove themselves only when their power begins to wane. And that's whatever you can find out here that will fit a myth, whatever you can find in here. That's the only beginning. That's the only place that a myth begins to attempt to prove itself. But then look around. What information is available in life? What's the only information that any reasonable person gives any note to? Well, information in some way proves itself. If it doesn't, it's of no, I don't know, significance. Well, at the very least, it's wrong, and if I hear what you're saying, at the very worst, it makes wrong sound like a Lutheran Sunday morning service or a beige suit or grits without anything on them. Except, of course, some more grits. Have you ever considered that some things, if you're trying to make an example of something being bland, is you start subtracting from it verbally? Like I say, it would be like having a salad without any salt and pepper, that you subtract from it without any dressing. But there are a few things in life that can be made apparently more bland by adding to them, like saying, well, that'd be as bad as grits with grits on them. At least any of you think that I'm making fun of regional cuisine. Think about it this way. Instead of grits, think about certain brain activities, certain thoughts. Well, to make them more bland, or that is less exciting or less meaningful, less significant, you'd have to subtract from them. Are you sure? When you get into this realm, instead of just southeastern good cooking and grits, that there's some information around that starts out that's in such a condition that if you add to it, it's like subtracting it. That is, if you had a certain revolutionary view, and here's some information, here's some thoughts I had, and let's say I'll build on that. And so by adding to it, it gets worse, and you never realize it. Yeah, that sounds like something as obscure as grits, don't it? Yeah, it sure does. Yeah, you'd hardly run across that anywhere. That was sarcasm, folks. I'll put it to you another way. Where would you go to hide from it? Yeah, but all the information in the world, that's the way it builds up. We find something that's of significance that can be proven, and then we build on it. That's science. I know. I love to read about science if I don't have anything else to do. That's technology. I love technology if I can't get by without it. Just like you. You build on that which is of some significance, that which has proved itself, that which is of personal significance to me. Right. I understand that. I understand that all myths at all local levels have now become ritualized. I understand that all myths now are taken literally. Even if you disagree with them. You don't have to agree with it. That's not the point. You should know that from the last couple of tapings, if you've been listening. The myth has become personalized, even if you hate it. Or even if you just say, well, I do not believe that myth. That myth is just impertinent. That myth is just useless. That myth is wrong. That doesn't matter. Don't you remember that little Kyrute about the guy that stood out the edge of his universe and stuck out his tongue and said, "Fool on the gods, because I think they're all just myths anyway." And the gods answered back, "So what?" That's like you. That's like any human saying, "Well, I don't have any respect for some myths, or I don't take them personally anymore because some of these myths, if I'm understanding what you're saying, some of these myths, like religions that, of these weird people are different from me." That is insane. That is absolutely useless. That just makes me laugh to hear people believe that is that they call that a religion. It's of no pertinence whatsoever to me. Right? Tell me about it. Yeah. I hate grits. There's too much grits everywhere. I cannot stand grits. Grits are meaningless to me. I wouldn't eat grits. I hate grits. Of no significance to me. Right. I understand. I got you down as a non-grit eater. And he added sarcastically, under his breath, "I've also got you down as a person who will never understand anything new. I got you as a person who is stuck with your own creation myth." Whenever you find your own intellect, which it's doing, you just don't notice it, continually proving what it knows, things that it's attempted to prove over and over and over and over and over, if it apparently has picked up something new, which is in itself a personalized illusion, but if you apparently have picked up a new fact, a new piece of information, your own intellect has to immediately attempt to prove it. It goes from the world of being alive, of being mythical, for a real revolutionist, into the world of it becoming a ritual, of it becoming a religion, of it becoming literal, of it becoming defined, which is the only way it's of any significance at the ordinary level. But it is per se, intrinsically, within itself, endogenously so, of no significance at a different level. If it's something that your old intelligence knows for a fact, stuff it. That's transcendental talk, I guess. It's of no personal significance. And if it does seem to become of some personal significance to you now, you have not raised the information up to a higher level. You have taken the potential of a higher level and you have dragged yourself back down to the point of, wait a minute, this is important. He's tricked me. Sometimes he talks so fast and I get in that room and I forget that some of the everyday things, by God, like where I am in lines, waiting here to be slaughtered, what my friends think of me, what my mother thinks of me, how much money I have, all the stuff that is of some significance. I'll grant you that. But sometimes I even forget that they're of some significance. And sometimes I have these kind of flashes going on, these thunderstorms in my brains, and I begin to have the fun, I think, stuff that nobody's ever thought before. And it's so much fun. But then I realize, wait a minute, you can't go around laughing. You can't go around laughing at death and dead people and your own parents and your own self. I just didn't want any of you to think that in some way, even now that you have little sparks, you have little visitation privileges to a new building site in your own intellect. Let us say that you're a new level of thinking every now and then. I don't want you to think, well, wait a minute. At this new level, I now have the potency, the power that I can take some old mundane information and pull it up to a new level. Nay. Now something has happened, but you got it sort of, shall I say, backwards. You have let the old information drag you back down to where it is. You're not Dante, you are the Inferno. Forget it. But as Einstein seemed to have proven to many paperback publishers about the Einstein for the millions, or whatever the book, Einstein for the hundreds, that it's all relative. It's all relative. If you're on a platform in space and the train flying by and all that, the spaceship, that you can believe that, wait a minute, I am raising the level of insanity, at least in me, the level of dumbness. I am bringing the Inferno up to higher ground. You just can't tell. All it is sucking you down. Oh, don't worry, it's not sucking you down. It's just taking you back where you belong. It just says, welcome home, booby. Back in my arms again. All right, let me try a little wrap up before we finish. See, there's a difference between a wrap up and a finish, if you know how to do it. And I started to say the wrap up always has to come before the finish, but then I would hope that some of you would say, wait a minute, it can't be that simple. Now, to wrap up before the finish, as long as I clearly define it, regarding myths, the telling of myths, their collapse by the telling, the destruction of being able to live out your own personal myth, if you personalize it, if you tell it. Can you see that this is tied to that which I hit just in passing tonight when I saw everyone's face run down to about 40 watts? The real use of a personal myth, of you being able to find and produce, not to tell about, not to write about, your own creation myth, and it's got to be separate from all the possibilities I enumerated tonight. It cannot simply start with either a beginning or no beginning. It cannot start from any position of dual kingdoms, dual rulers, dichotomies, two choices, even three choices. But it cannot do that. But if you can find how to produce it yourself, you'll find that the only myth that has any validity is that myth, that symbol, that is in you undefined, undifferentiated. It has to be. There is no journey, there is no adventure, there is no new way to think unless you can find that your own creation myth, a place in you that is undefined. Connected with that, may I refer you back to something that some of you benefited from in the past. If you can begin to get some glimpse of the fact that the only symbols, the only words that are of any use to this kind of journey, this kind of adventure, are symbols that are undefined. Now that's insane, it's irrational, so don't anybody write me out there on tape. Don't bother. I'd be delighted to hear from you, to know that there's sane people. But that is absolutely insane. There is no way to dress that up. There is no way to prove that. There is no way to apologize for that. It's insane. You cannot have words that do not have a definition. You can't have symbols that are meaningless. If they're meaningless, perforce, they're not symbols. Because a symbol represents something. If it's not a word, if it's just a sign of a stream of water and a cross through it, that means throughout the world is, don't take a leak on the side of the road in Brussels or Amsterdam or Teaneck. Well, I don't think they have them in New Jersey, but the symbol has got to be meaningful. So it's insane, to say the very least, for me to be charitable to myself. Thank you. It is meaningless and insane, irrational, illogical, impertinent, impotent to say that the only meaningful symbol is that which has no meaning. The only words that have any potency are those that are undefined. But some of you know better. You just never thought about it in this way. But this is real energy ammunition. It's just not needed for any sort of battle being fought on planet Earth. There's no reason for anybody to have to think this way, unless you wanted to, and unless you can. Because if you want to and you can't, it ain't going to do any good, is it? What I started to say, if you begin to get some grasp of that, you'll also understand the one that some of you liked at another time in another direction of me pointing out, if you understand this, you get a glimpse that only undefined words have any revolutionary significance, then you understand why I said, and why some of you liked the idea that the world is big enough for everybody. Because the world must be big enough for everybody. That's why it's big enough. Do you follow? That it has to be big enough for not only the three major mafia families to fight it out, for the three major car manufacturers to come out through competition, through collusion, to come out with the best possible model of an automobile, the best possible operations of the number games in Queens. Why the world has got to be big enough that everybody, not only you and I being intelligent people, but those other dunderheads with all those half-assed, silly, asinine opinions and beliefs, at least remember, if they begin to overwhelm you and they begin to get on your shoes and then your cuts, you can always move to Montana, Idaho, Canada even. The world is big enough for everybody because it must be big enough. And it must be big enough so that everything that can possibly be said about anything else can be said and has a market somewhere. Has a half-life that of at least long enough for one person to go, well, I think that an old shoe in the road is somewhat like a transaxle. We'll assume that that one lasted only as long as it took one person to say that. Then that one person found no personal significance. Didn't oppose it, didn't want to rethink about it, didn't want to redefine it. You know, it's life having one of those little things like you have. And one person said that. But there has to be room for that. If not, and somebody wanted to say that, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? Open the door of the universe and step out? Is you know, that great Detroit philosopher John Lee Hooker says, if it's in him, it's got to come out. And this guy has got to say that an old shoe in the road is like a transaxle. And there's not room to say it because it's of no personal significance. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to live. But it's in him and it's got to come out just like the boogie. So what's he going to do? Where's he going to go? Is he going to explode? And if so, you know, he might get your clothes dirty. He might hurt somebody standing next to him. He might do it while in the temple. He might upset things. He might do it while they're filming some TV show and he's in the audience. He's got to have room to do it. That's why there is room to do it. That's why everything has room to be defined. Oh, I know a lot of the definitions are ill spent, awkward, wrong, but there's room for them. Except the ordinary level of intelligence is driven through this imaginary struggle that, well, all right, put your way, there is room for it. But our job here, the gods have sent us down, that is, the brittle, dead gods, now that I've turned it into that, the gods sent us here to get rid of the rest of this. That is all the wrong stuff. So it does not see it as it being some sort of boon condition, that it's good that there's room for everything. No, no, no. Now it's good that I'm here to try and make less room for this. I mean all the weird stuff, the wrong stuff. The stuff that is, go ahead say it. The stuff that is, come on say it. The stuff that is wrong, no, come on. No, the stuff that's evil, come on. The stuff that's, come on, say it. This of no personal significance to me? Aha. I was going to rest my case, but I didn't bring it with me. So we'll go directly from the partial wrap-up to fini. Your own personal myth. And to do this, everybody must have one. Must. Your own personal myth must remain undefined, unidentified, unspoken.